You know, I think that's one of the things that we need most in the church today, content generators. And yes, we have a lot of content generators in social media, on Facebook, through live video or pictures, what have you. But really, we need more written content. We need to share more of our complete story of why we do the things that we do. You know, if we want to share what's happening in our churches and our communities, the impact that our members are having, our institutions, education, then we have to be consistent about telling our story, our complete story, by writing about it. And so we're going to go about studying those things. Now, the objective for generating news content is to share with the Adventist world and non-believers who we are, what we do, what drives us as a church, what's our community work like, you know, why we do the things that we do, and how we strive to fulfill the mission of the church. So that's our objective, to inform, to educate, to inspire. You know, news stories is not just about sharing, oh, we did this, our youth group did this. It's really telling a story of why we do the things that we do as a church. You know, why do we want to instill values early on in life with our children, with our members, with our new believers? Why do we promote a healthy lifestyle as part of our identity, and so on? Our news stories help inspire members to continue supporting the mission of the church. It helps educate the external public about who we are, what we believe in, and it also documents our story as a church, the story of our church, our initiatives, our activities, which make the difference in the church today, which made the difference last week, last month, this decade. So it's important to document. This is part of our history of what works, what helps us connect to the community for future generations. Now, what could be news? News could be community impact, any cleanup in the community, in the parks, any marches. I'm sure lots of marches happen where you are, lots of soup kitchens or any kind of community outreach there, any donations to needy children, to needy families. That could be news. Also, the development of children and the young people. There's lots of programs we have at church that help strengthen our values in children with the programs like Pathfinders, Adventurers, all these activities, VBS, anything like that, that it's positive and produces a positive life and change is newsworthy. Conversion of believers. When we welcome new believers to our campaigns, to our big events, to our festivals, that's big news because that's part of fulfilling the mission of the church. Our impact in the church as well. You know, we have lots of programs that strengthen our church members, their spirituality. We have the Lord Transforming. What is the church doing about motivating the church to really draw closer to God, to pursue a daily relationship with God through prayer and the study of the Word? Those things can really be highlighted because it's the life of the church. The progress of our churches or institutions, that's news. A new church, a new building, a new center of influence, new facility, all those things can be news. Disasters. What does a church do after a disaster, after an earthquake, after a hurricane? We get out there, advocates out there, community services get out there, church members help out any way they can. That's worth a news story as well. The impact of events, festivals too, that's something that we could highlight. That makes news in our church, as well as accomplishments by our church members. You know, if our members, our students receive an award, are distinguished, that's news. It shows discipline. It shows what we believe, and it represents all of us. This is all about church image when we're writing, when we're being the voice for the church in the content that we generate. Also, news could be the visit by a high-ranking government official to our churches, to our institutions. That could be highlighted. Also, church leaders, what they say over there in Jamaica. You are in the media all the time, and it's probably the union that's the most highlighted in the news because you have good connections with the media through Nigel, and that's really, really commendable. That's really great. And so I encourage you to start documenting what's happening in your church. Start writing about it. Start sharing it, because the more we share with our church, the more we can share outside in the external audience as well. When we assist the community through any kind of disaster relief, that's good to highlight as well. So how do you tell the story? It's very simple, and probably most of you know all these 6 important elements that your story needs to have. You know, what happened? What took place exactly? When did it take place? The date, exact date when it took place. You know, where did it take place? What city? What community? What country? Who was involved in it? How many people were involved? You know, how was it organized? How did it take place? A little bit of background of how it was organized. All that kind of information. And why? That's very important, the why. Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we organize activities? Why? That has to be a highlight, because we believe this and this and that related to your article. Now, for example, for this event that you're having this week, you know, what's the real thing that happened? What is it about? When did it take place? Where did it take place exactly? What church? What building? You know, who was involved? You know, quotes by the organizers are very important. Why? Was there a need? What are the challenges? Why does the church think, your conference thinks that this kind of gathering, this kind of workshop, it's so important? What are the results that they're expecting to get out of this? What are some of the proposed projects or teams of projects that are expected after this? It's all about networking. It's all about discovering the gifts and the talents and the technology and the resources that you have at hand. So a story needs to tell the full story. It needs to show all the details so that we can show the members, so they can understand what took place, why was it so important, and also it can also educate people who don't know about us, you know, out in the community, who don't know why we do the things that we do. So it's not very difficult. If you feel like, oh, I'm not a good writer, don't worry. This is very, very simple. And, you know, News Story tells the story of what took place briefly, but with all kinds of details or information, comments, the quotes, any pertinent information. A news story lets the reader know why we do the things that we do as a church, like we've said already. You know, the goal for news stories is to have fresh information. Fresh means what took place this week, what took place maybe last week, this month, not something that took place maybe 6, 7, 8, or even a year ago. News stories need to be fresh. If something took place in your church this weekend, jot down some of the things really quick. Get all your stuff in gear before the event, before the initiative or activity, and get that story out as soon as you can. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if we answer all those 6 elements that a news story needs, those 6 questions, you can get to form a really good story. It needs to be relevant. Why is this story relevant? How could it be of interest to the people in the church and outside the church? It needs to be accurate. It needs to be precise. We need to have the least errors possible. Get the names right, get the details right, get the dates right, get the comments right. And your story needs to be inspiring. You know, anything that we write needs to inspire others. You know, a lot of people are looking to Inter-America in all the countries and all the unions in our area because there are so many initiatives, so many great activities that are taking place, so much community outreach. So your stories can inspire someone all the way in Asia, Pacific, anywhere. We've had that happen in the last 20 or so years. We've had people connect with us and tell us how this little story down in Jamaica or in the Caribbean or in Venezuela inspired them to start a new initiative. So when you write, don't just think about yourself locally in your church. Think about sharing it with your conference, with your territory, with your union, with the Inter-American Division, you know, and the rest of the world church. We have a system where we get news from our unions. They send it to us, and my job specifically is to make sure I can propel that to the rest of the world church. So whatever news you have that can be fresh, relevant, precise, inspiring, it could go far, and you can inspire other people, not only in your online community as well, but all around the world church and even beyond. We have news that make it to Adventist News Network, and there are video news. Nigel knows that a lot because he gets a lot of those stories in as well. Also in Adventist Review and Adventist World as well. So keep that in mind, how important your role, because the action happens right there at your church. And we know that a lot of things are happening. And I believe that your conference there in the Central Jamaica really, really wants to use you and motivate you to sharing more of what's taking place and how it's impacting people in the church and people in the community as well. So we don't have a lot of time to go step by step on how to write news, but I have two resources that I want to share with you, and that's news writing. You can find a lot of seminars. There's one that's step by step. You can compose a news article, and that's in idmedia.interamerica.org. Also, we follow the A&N Style Guide, and that's found in news.adventist.org. So these are two key resources that I want you to, when you have some time, just look over it, and it's a good refresher if you're already a professional in it, but think about your role as content generator. To be able to be a good content generator, you need to know your church. Know your local leaders. Talk to your pastor. Talk to your elders. Go to meetings. Find out what's taking place in your church every week, every month, so that you can prepare for it and be ready to cover any kind of event or activity. Get to know your leaders. Get to know more about your church across Jamaica. I'm sure all of you are very informed about what's happening in the different parts in Jamaica, the East and the West. So get to know your leaders, know who your conference leaders are as well, know who your union leaders are, what they say. Keep up with the news of what's happening in your church so that you can be a better storyteller when you write these stories. Get to know Inter-America. Did you know that Inter-America has 24 unions? It has about 150 conferences and missions. It has about 42 countries and islands. It has 3 languages, dozens of dialects. Know more about your leadership. It's going to be better for you as a communicator, as a content generator. The more you know, the better it is. And like I said, don't forget to share your news stories. You know, your church needs your stories. You need to post them on the web, on their website. You need to share them on social media. Share your stories with the conference. Share them with your union. Share them with the division as well. We need your stories. We need to propel those stories, that content, to the rest of the world church. And also have in mind that anything that you write for the church needs to be ready for the media outlets where you are. And if you have any questions about writing and connecting with the media, you can talk to Nigel, because he has probably the best media connections than all of our unions in Inter-America. So if you have any questions about that, he is your best person to answer those questions. You can share your stories. Remember, send them to your union, send them to your conference. You can tag us too. You can visit us at interamerica.org and see some of the stories that we highlight from your territory, from the different countries and unions in our division. You have our Twitter address there. You have my email at stevensli@interamerica.org, and Twitter as well. So remember, you can be the voice of your church when you generate content. So I encourage you to take this role, take this responsibility, and share complete stories, share complete content in writing so that others can learn about the church, learn about this message that we're all very passionate and committed to.
Done. Turn on the light, please. No more of that. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you were listening keenly. All right. Let me take comments at this time. First from Elder Cook. I've not heard from him from evenings. I'm going to ask Elder, please share with us from your heart about news writing. There's another presentation on photography, but we promise not to keep you guys later than the 8:30 we planned. So we're not going to play it this evening. We have to hold it and try to work it out. So we're going to stick to the news writing this evening. Here a comment from Elder Cook. Then I'm going to take Chris Telly and questions from the audience. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I think Libna puts it broadly within its context, the importance of having stories written. As she rightly said, it's one of the things that's basically lacking, I would say, in the division. It's not just about Jamaica that we might have challenges. I know it's difficult. People don't like to write. I can tell you that I hated writing when I just came to the union. I begged the administrators for someone to write. But after a while, I wasn't getting anywhere. And then I just decided that I just have to take this on, learn the art, practice, and just try to do my best with it. One of the good things, or one of the keys to writing good stories, is to read other people's story that they write. If you read the newspaper a lot, you will get to see how they write stories. And automatically, when you're writing, you'll remember a story written and you'll get into it. Her reference to the website, news.adventist.org, it's critical because that's really the format that the Seventh-day Adventist Church writes in. And it's the reverse pyramid, which says you basically put in the most important news first and leave the least important last. Now, that's exactly how the news media operates too. That's how they accept news. That's how they write. So if they are cutting, they'll cut from the bottom where the least important information is. And so if you put the most important information there, chances are it might get cut. So I'm here encouraging each one of you who are watching, listening, to decide within yourself that you're going to do it. And when you decide that it's just going to mean reading more, writing more, practicing, unless you naturally would have the habit or the likeness for it, it would be easy. But I'm not here to say it is easy. So don't get me wrong. I took a while to get over that hill. I think I'm not over the hill. It's the biggest space in the room right now to learn and to grow, to learn more. I have a mentor in media, Desmond Allen. He is, I just love to read when he writes. He has motivated me and encouraged me a lot. And a lot of people in media and outside respects his writing. I remember when he got the Order of Distinction, and at his reception afterwards, this lady, throwing accolades on him, she closed her accolade by saying, Usain Bolt can run, Desmond Allen can write. So I mean that's him. She's saying he's like the perfect writer. And then I always said to him when I grew up, I'd like to write like you. So sometimes it is good to have someone whose writing you really appreciate and you look forward to reading it. But news writing is very important. And news writing is different from writing a story about, well, news writing is a specific type of story. It's basically a story hitting the point, telling it like it is, keeping the reader's attention and holding it to the end. As I said before, it's not easy, but it can be done. And I just encourage all of you to try. Okay, one step at a time and you'll make it.
Thank you, Loco. Just before I take Christelle, let me just say this, that as a director, this is one area that, for example, for the first year I was a director, I got one news article from a local church. One for the full year. Yeah. I need to say more because things are happening within the conference that are newsworthy, but persons are not writing. Christelle, give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I've probably been in my role, less than all of you, but contrary to, I guess, Nigel Coke, I find that writing is the aspect that I enjoy the most. That's where I feel most comfortable. But still, there's a lot of room for improvement. And, I appreciated what he said about reading the newspaper and getting a sense of the style, because I find that as well. Like when you read a certain type of publication, then you get a sense of what they're looking for, and it's easier to get your writing in their publication. So I'm still working on that aspect. One thing that I also I'm working on, I'll say, is getting more people to write articles. But I find like if you get to know people, and what they're really interested in, then it's easier to get them to write articles about those things, like my fellow directors, for example, or even pastors who have a passion for a certain area, like health, let's say. So I really appreciated that aspect of what Libna Stevens said, get to know your elders, your pastors, your conference, etc. And also think beyond your own conference and, your conference magazine or newsletter or whatever the case is. Try to get your story, what the things that your conference is doing out there to the world so that they can also be inspired. And that's something that I hope to do more in my role. And I'll just give a quick example. This is the last thing I'll say, but I'm really hoping this will come together. So I'm sure that you heard of, in Toronto, there's a terrible incident where, this man, he likely had a mental illness. So he rented a van and he drove on the sidewalk on a really busy street in Toronto and just plowed down pedestrians. And he killed 10 and then 15 were injured.
Yeah, we
And
heard
just oh, you heard about that. Yeah, so just through speaking with the union director, he was asking, well, the union communications director asked, were there any Adventists involved, like, as victims? And to my knowledge, there weren't any. But then I pitched a story idea of what about writing about Adventists being involved in helping in the situation. And just through that, I reached out to people that I knew, different friends and colleagues. And I found out there were 3 different groups that were helping in this situation. One is the Pathfinders. There was a prayer vigil, and there was also a kind of prayer walk, and they were involved with that. And then pastors went to the site of the accident, and they set up booths, and they're offering counseling and prayer to people. They've been there since Monday, and they'll be there until tomorrow. And apparently they've been getting a lot of people coming in and just requesting prayer and saying, we're so happy you're here. And the community organization, for that region actually wants to connect with them long term. And then the other group is our academy students. Like the academy in Toronto is actually very close to that site as well. So that hasn't come together yet, but I think it's very important that people see that we're doing something beyond just our Adventist bubble. So that would be my last piece of advice. Just, look for those kinds of stories and just try to be aware of what's going on around you.
All right, thank you, Crystal. That's a good testimony. But myself, yourself, Ella Cook, we are being paid to write.
Yeah.
But Charmaine, as a local church person, you at an event, she wrote it. By the way, Charmaine wrote the story on the Deaf Church. I think 2 stories about the baptism of 4 or 5 deaf persons. That story went all the way to ANN and the Adventist Review. But she had not sent me anything in recent times. But tell me, what are some of the challenges you face when you sit down to write? I mean, it's not your paid job, What are some challenges you face?
I think for me, it's spotting the story. So like how Crystal, right? It wasn't in her face, but she somehow, got a story out of the unfortunate incident. And for me, that's a challenge I probably have, because a story could be there, but I don't recognize it's a story because I'm not really a writer per se. So that is something that I'll have to conquer.
The audience, I'm looking for your questions if you have any. I noticed that someone is raising their hand, Hortense Kennedy. If you still want to talk, you can text, let me know. We're wrapping up now. In a few minutes, Ella Cook. Some detailed stuff now. Tell me about captioning, because many times it has happened to me before. You're writing a nice story, you're focusing on the words, but when you're done, you need some pictures to put there, and you end up with a picture without knowing who is in it. How important is captioning in news writing?
Kristen, you're gonna do the photo one another day? Because
good question.
Preempting it, I'm sure she would have. But
we're going to, but I can tell you this question won't preempt it.
Okay. The question about captioning. Repeat what you had asked about it.
I'm saying that sometimes you're writing and you're focusing on the words, but when you're ready to put in your photos, you don't have any caption. You can't remember who this person was, and and stuff like that. What are some, or maybe you should just give me an overall thing about, because news writing doesn't start when you sit down to write. It starts when you're at the event and taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it actually, yeah, it starts there. I could go a bit further. There were two young men, I remember at NCU, that I was really training. And there was an occasion, the Thanksgiving, prayer and Thanksgiving service for the security forces that NCU has annually. And they came, we were there early, and I took them through the pace. I said to them, you're gonna get your program. You're gonna look at the program. You know what it is about. Try at that time to figure out what is gonna be the news highlight for that day. So on it there, I asked the question, on it you have, they had Rose Lane, for in remembrance of the policemen who passed away for the past year. There's going to be the message, and there was a recognition and award for some of the policemen who performed well in their duties over the past year, about 8 or 10 of them. So I said, you're gonna look on it and decide where you want your news to be. One said his news would be the awards, and the other said the Rose Lane. So where you have each police lay a rose in memory of a policeman when they call the name. And so I said, okay, fine. So you know when you go in there, you're going to take pictures, but if this is going to be your highlight, you have to make sure you get your best shot. And when you get your shot, it's not about just getting the best shot, but as you rightly said, he could not take, that's the award one, a picture of 3 people in the awards, and then he just walk away. He would have to know who is getting it, who is presenting it, and why it is being presented. So a part of the thing is that, because I would always have my pen and either the program or a notebook, and I basically write the photo number and basically who is in it. If I don't know the person that is in it, I basically would approach the person afterward to say, what is your name? Now, after asking what is the name, a next critical point is spelling the name correctly. People hate when you spell the name wrong. And so, don't, because they say it is Carol Weatherbird, you just write Carol. I mean, you have some Carol, it starts with K. So make sure that you go to the person to say, what's the name, what's the exact spelling, because, names have various spelling and all of that. So that is key. Knowing the news photo that you're going to take and ensuring that what you're taking, you can identify with it, you can identify who is in it. And of course, if I should move on to captioning, normally you caption with people in the photo, you start from left to right, the person from the left to the right. Also with captioning, you basically write your caption in the present tense. So you don't say John Doe presented a plaque to Orinthia Cole. You basically say presents. So it's written in the present tense and not the past tense. Afterwards, you can go on in your second line or sentence to go in the past tense. What the person does is to be done in the present tense. Also, be careful not to go probably beyond 3 lines in any caption. It would be good if 1 line of a caption can in it and what they're doing. But bear in mind, a caption bears the same sort of requirements, just like a story. You have to say who, you have to say what, you have to say when, you have to say where, and if necessary, how or why. But all the criteria and the characteristics of a news story is required for captioning a photo. Because of course, they say a photo is 1,000 words. So sometimes if you can just put up a photo and caption it properly, trust me, that stands as a news by itself.
Well, Libna is going to say a lot more about that tomorrow, but just letting you know, Eloko, that Odin is saying to you that he really appreciates this open discussion. Personal stories helps to encourage us. Now, boy, I mean, I'm just about enjoying the discussion, but we're close to our closing time. Just let me just explain to you what happened earlier. We're in two minds about how to go about this presentation. We were trying to think about the wider audience beyond those who are joining this in this forum. So we have some challenges there, but we have a good team here working hard patiently. And right now we're streaming on YouTube, but our idea was to stream on both YouTube and Facebook platforms. So we have learned a lot of lessons this evening. And tomorrow evening, we're talking about website for local churches. We're having the assistant communication director for the GC, Brent Harding, coming in, and so we invite you to participate. We're going to be sending out the link during the day to all of you, so you can register and plan to be on. The idea is that we want to start early so that we can have discussion, because this is a part, I believe this is the most important part, where we can talk openly, we can ask the questions, and we can truly hear the real story, because I've been blessed by what Christelli and Ella Cook and what Charmaine has said about news writing. So I'm making this appeal to those of you who are attending, watching, and wherever you're watching. We need you to write. We know it's challenging, but please attend the services, get to know your leaders, take your notes. If you have to use a phone to record the audio, take that important picture of the person handing over something, whatever it is, and start writing. All right? You're saying something, Ella?
I'm just kind of disappointed that there isn't any question.
Okay, I'm watching the chat, and no, I'm not seeing any question right now. So
may I ask something?
Yeah, go ahead, Charmaine.
Or something to note. Usually the heading is what would grab as a reader, the heading is what grabs my attention. And so that's one of the challenges too, to get that heading to grab the attention.
You're putting off your head right now.
I was just about to say, all we are seeing is your heading.
All I'm seeing is the heading.
The top.
Okay. Oh, I was slinking in the chair. No, I'm talking about, no, what I'm saying is that the heading is also important. What, the heading for your article or whatever.
It's the attention grabber.
Yeah, it's the attention grabber. So yes, you grab the attention, and then you work now on keeping the attention.
Yes, it's very important. A lot of times for me, the two difficult parts of writing a story is for me to write the headline and the first paragraph. Once I get through those two, it is smooth sailing. And sometimes the headline might be easy, and sometimes I have to go back and change it. But that first paragraph, that lead, that they call it, the lead.
Yes.
It's let me tell you, it poses a lot of challenge for me at times. I don't just at times just go and just write a lead and go on into the story. At times I change it I go back, I change it. And even when I'm finished writing the story, I change the lead.
Yeah.
Because the lead is so important that you have to make sure. I mean, I remember when I was doing journalism at NCU, and they would say to us, let your headline be no more than 3 words. I mean, really testing, you know, right? And then we got lead should be no more than 16 words. Now that's tight because you know even every A every is a word,
Yeah.
and it's tight. But that's how. And even when we were given the newspaper to take what they have as headline and lead and get it tighter. And it was really a challenge, and it is something that probably the persons on could do. You take the newspaper, whether Gleaner or Observer, look at their headline and say, how could I, you know, you go through the story and say, how could I shorten this headline? It helps, it gets your brain working. How could I shorten this lead? And sometimes the lead and the headline that they do have a lot of slack in it. So the headline needs to be as short as possible. And sometimes when it is short, they have a sub head for it to help. So, and it's easy when it is probably 1 word. It is our 2 words. I mean, look at the Observer on Monday. 2 words, fatal Monday,
Yeah.
referring to the crash that took place. 2 words, fatal Monday. Now that must grab your attention. It didn't mean you have to say in the headline, there was a 5-car vehicle accident. You don't have to spell it, all of that. That would come in your lead. You just need to grab. I can tell you one headline that made my sister but by an Observer one Monday, and it has 2 words. It had 2 words. When Dr. Allen was called as the Governor General, his last yes, it was an ordination, Sir at Andrews. And he said in the whole thing that he confessed that he didn't plan anything like this. It was something he wanted to do. But the headline in the Observer the next morning had 2 words: GG confesses. And the paper was sold off because people wanted to know what the GG confessing. When they read the story, he was confessing that he
But that's an
didn't.
example of what Odin is saying. That persons sometimes give misleading headline. But
Yes.
Odin is making a point. If Odin, if you want me to bring you on, I can do that. Asking about writing support for young writers in the church. Well, let me just say this quickly that right now on the table, I've placed on the table the idea of incentive for local church communicators who actually get articles published. We're looking into that.
Yeah.
Might not be a big incentive, but some incentive for them. All right, it's time for us to close, but let me remind you, what Libna said about reading the ANN style guide, that's very important. That's how Adventists write news. The ANN style guide, just read through it, follow it, and that's a good place to start. Well, thank you very much, my guest.
ALM style guide.
Charmaine, thank you, Ella Coke. Christelle, do you have any final word for us?
Yeah, so I don't have anything else except just to say I really enjoyed being part of this. So thank you for inviting me.
Okay, you're welcome. And thank you to all of our attendees and those watching online. Thank you very much.
Exactly, where's Christelle?
I'm here.
We're Ontario Conference, Ontario, Canada.
Yeah, I think I actually corresponded with you before.
No, I just want to know exactly where you are in Canada.
Oh, I'm in Oshawa.
Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah, I'm just outside of Toronto.
Okay, so technology bringing us together to be able to talk about news.
You should know Mansell Edwards, Pastor Mansell Edwards.
Oh, yes, yes.
That's the boss.
That's my boss, yes.
Oh, tell him hello for me.
Okay, I will.
That's my good friend.
Okay.
All right, so please join us. I'm looking at my boss over there, Mr. Charles Bulgin, to tell me the time I should start tomorrow. What happened?
Try for 6 o'clock, just in case. If you have
what happened is that 6:30 is giving us a challenge. I must be honest, with traffic, Kingston traffic and all that. So I'm still going to start at 6:30 because that's what we have scheduled. And we're going to have the chat 6:30. Then we'll start the presentation 7 and end so we can have discussion. But thank you again for joining us. And God bless you. Eloko, please just pray for us to close.
And
Eloko, we ask you to pray to close.
He's frozen.
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right. Let me pray then. Dear Father, thank you for your presence with us this evening, for the wonderful discussions we have had, for our participants who joined us across the world, and for what we have learned. May you bless us and help us to continue to use technology to further your cause and to tell the story of Jesus, we pray in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye. Have a good evening.
take care.